Welcome to Teacher Talks. I'm Maria Keffler.
And I'm Erin Brewer, and this is our last episode, and it's a little bit of a challenging episode because we want to talk about what teachers can do to get support if they're in a situation where there's a child who's identifying as transgender and the parents are insisting that the teacher accept that, or they're in a school which is accepting this whole transgender ideology. It's a really difficult spot to be in. What would you recommend to them, Maria?
Wow, it is tough because every teacher is in a different situation. You know, some teachers maybe feel like they don't have alternatives to their job. There may be situations where, as a teacher with a conscience about this issue, you may not be able to continue working in the public school, or at least in your particular public school, if you are being forced to violate your conscience. It may be necessary to leave that job. There are alternatives. There are private schools, there are parochial schools. We're also hearing increasingly, as more and more people are homeschooling. I know of a couple of teachers personally who have left the public schools and who are providing homeschool support, either by actually tutoring kids in homeschool, or some families are creating like homeschool pods where several kids in different families are sort of homeschooling together, and they bring in content area experts to teach. I think this is a really exciting time in terms of a shift for teachers about what's possible, what's available. I really don't have high hopes about the future of the public school system as far as whether people of conscience are going to be able to stay and work there and support it, as we're increasingly being forced to violate our consciences in order to keep our jobs. But there are options, and you do have rights and you do have choices.
And I want to refer people to it's actually called the National Navigating Transgender Landscape School Resource Guide. It's an incredibly well-written guide. It has information there about your rights as a teacher, about how to address these issues. It's really well documented. So it's a guide that you as a teacher could really find helpful, but also to provide to administrators. If you have a school board or an administrator who is trying to force you to accept this transgender ideology, this is a way for you to push back on it and say, no, this is what I'm going to follow. These are the ways in which I'm going to handle it, and encourage your administrators and school boards to do the same. I know it's very hard sometimes to stand up, and especially when there's a potential that you will lose your job. I just heard about a case of a teacher who had a student who sent her a coming out letter as a transgender child. And the teacher was familiar with the child, knew the parents well, knew the parents were concerned and involved in this child's life, and forwarded that email to the parents, and she was fired. She is now suing the school district, but that's a potential consequence of standing up to this ideology that we have to be aware of. I think it's worth it. And there are times when we are called to be our better selves, and we have to take a stand. And I think this is one of those times where we really have to take the risk that we could lose something. And it's not until you're threatened with losing something that you really find out what's important to you and where your values are. And it can be incredibly scary, but it's also really important. And I think about, again, the horrors of the Holocaust. And if people early on had been strong enough to stand up and say, no, this isn't right, and pushed back on it, yes, there would have been consequences to it, but it might have changed the course of history. And I do feel like that we're getting at one of those moments that is that critical, that we need to stand up for truth. We need to stand up for these children.
Because we are talking about the destruction of children's bodies. This is not just, oh, isn't it nice and kind and tolerant to tell children that what they think is real? That's not what this is. We are seeing kids medicalized at younger and younger ages for an ideology that has no research, scientific, data-based foundation. This is an ideology that has been pushed. And I agree with you, Erin. There comes a time where we have to say, this is more important. This is what I need to stand up for, even if it costs me something. Because if we don't stand up to protect our children who is going to? And teachers, we are on the front lines of this. I think what that teacher did, forwarding that information to parents, was exactly the right thing to do, because nobody should come between a child and his or her parents. Even Child Protective Services, if they suspect abuse, they come and knock on the front door. They don't sneak around from behind and try to steal the child, which is what's happening when we cut parents out of the equation.